Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the newly named Three-Man Booth. I think we got millions of submissions and they were all vetted. We only ended up seeing about 100 of them. Our team of people narrowed it down from millions to 100, and this is the one we decided upon. So I don't know who deserves the credit for Three-Man Booth, but that's what we're going with for now. I guess it could always change.
Power to the people. Thank you for all those suggestions.
It was a painstakingly long process, but I think the credit goes to a YouTube commenter, and I should know who actually commented on, I believe it was the first video, but yes, it was definitely a submission from somebody who has listened and watched.
Okay, good. Well, we've got a new name, Three-Man Booth. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. If you're a returner, nice to have you back. Trying to just talk about some of the challenges, experiences we've had going through our broadcasting careers. Ted has always had a really fancy background, say with Mike. I wanted to join the party, so right here I got a picture of my wife, Blake Lively, and I. You might know her. She's kind of a big deal. She's been in lots of movies and TV shows. This was my Advanced Edition Award that I received yesterday, because everyone's got to have an award apparently, and then my bookshelf. So now I feel like I'm with the cool kids.
So cheap.
I asked my wife to give me printing capability, because I've always, if I needed something printed, I would just ask her, because I very rarely need something printed. And I don't think she had any idea that I was going to print 3 meaningless pictures. But it fooled someone. I don't want to name the person in our family, because someone actually thought I received an Advanced Edition Award. They were very excited for me and couldn't tell that it was a fake award.
Well, I don't even know what an integer is, so I guess you're ahead of me then.
Well, you obviously would not win an Advanced Edition Award. So we've got a whole lot of topics that we plan on covering. We do this every other week. And, we're always adding to the list, and we definitely love to hear from you. Last week or last episode, we talked about the agent process, which was totally something that was submitted by a buddy of ours, John Nolan, who's taken the time to view some of these episodes. So if you've got an idea, we'll absolutely run with it. Something that we've kind of bounced around was discussing the preparation and the spotting board, spotting chart part of a broadcast. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We'll even, if I don't screw it up, have the ability to show you guys some of our various charts for various sports that we have and kind of walk you through. So I don't know which of you guys wants to start, but we'll begin the conversation on spotting charts.
Are we going to try screen sharing?
Yeah. So we're producing on the fly here. Do I need
I don't think you need to do anything. I'm going to try and share my screen, and let me know if this works here. And you should be seeing North Dakota State chart. So this was one of the last football games that I did this year. And this is something that has been a work in progress for quite some time, because basically at the beginning when I started doing college football, I had very little college football experience. So I asked a bunch of people if I could see what their charts look like. And then I just stole their ideas and turned them into what I thought would work. And since I have a Mac, some of them were made in Microsoft Publisher. So I made this in a free program, which is called Open Office. That's the suite of programs. It's your Microsoft suite. And then this program is called Draw, D-R-A-W, presumably for drawing, but this is what I use it for. So the way I designed it is, in a broadcast, the person we're going to be talking about the most, presumably, is the quarterback. And studies show that when the human brain goes to read things, your eyes go to the upper left-hand corner of the page. So I designed it intuitively for me that way. Some people put the quarterback in the middle, but this is the way that it works for me. So everything here is its own text box. So this... Yes.
Yeah. We're saying Harvard basketball.
Yeah.
Do you see your North Dakota State chart on your screen?
Well, that's not very helpful. Now do you still see Harvard?
I still see Harvard, yeah.
Okay, good. All right, so I saw North Dakota State. But anyway, so this is the basketball one. So the way I do basketball is
Harvard's really smart, Ted, and they've decided they're going to bring a quarterback to basketball. I think that's what they're trying to tell.
Tommy Amaker is the quarterback of this Harvard team. So I will do the head coach and the assistants underneath, and then I'll try and put the trainer if I can find the trainer's name. And then up top is just here I'll have recent. So what have they done recently that I want to make note of, perhaps early on in the game? And then Harvard over the last couple of years has had a bunch of injuries. So I'm trying to make note of those. This was supposed to be for the Ivy League tournament that got canceled. So I did all my prep and then it went away. So this was kind of their history in the NCAA tournament. And then I will do from top down the top scorer all the way down to the bottom scorer, because I feel like we're going to be talking about the guy who scores the most. I want him at the top. So I'll keep, this is more of a relic from my days doing radio, where I would keep the averages, which honestly I don't reference all that often, but it makes me feel more comfortable, I guess, to have that in there. And it also helps to have the raw data. So like here, instead of putting 0%, I put 0 attempts. So if a guy hits his first 3 of the year, then I would know that it was his first attempt and his first shot of the year. And his first made basket of the year. And then here I'll put, Chris Lewis is in the robotics club. At any other school, that would be super impressive. At BioInfo in here for those guys. So that's what my basketball looks like. But all of these, this is super customizable. That's the first name is a text box. The last name is a text box. The number is a text box. The fouls, which I mark off with a Sharpie, is another text box. The BioInfo is another text box. This text box here is separate from this text box over here. So it's really annoying when you start making it, but it's very easily customizable in that way. So I think that it makes it easier for me. So that's my basketball chart. I will now attempt to show you a football chart, if that works. And let me know if you see the North Dakota State Bison. Okay.
The Bison.
Yes. I should really make that the Bison.
Yeah. Oh, trust me. I know. They will get on to you.
So this was for an FCS semifinal game at the Fargo Dome back in late December. And so as I was saying before, inadvertently, when showing you the wrong thing, I have the quarterback on the left, then the running backs, receivers, tight ends, and specialists all the way on the right-hand side. I have a little box for the head coach and the offensive coordinator here. And then down here is all of my notes, where the only standard thing that I really put in there is what happened to them last week. And then up here, I have a little bit of space for notes on the offensive line, some more note space up here. And so that's what the offensive part looks like for North Dakota State. And then for the defense, what I would do is, let's see if I can go to Montana State was the opposing team. Do you see Montana State?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then try one more time to show you this. This is what the defense would look like. Do you see the defensive side now?
Yep.
So I make this customizable every week. This is a 4-3 setup, but you can drag and drop to make it for a 3-4, a 3-3-5, a 4-2-5, so that I know at each level what everybody's going to look like. I've got notes up top. I keep a little box for the venue, just any notes there. That's any interesting stats. And then a box for the defensive coordinator as well. And I like this because some people have their charts made for them and then usually overnighted to them by Tuesday or Wednesday in a week. But as you can see with certain names, like the defensive coordinator, if I had somebody else make that, they're not going to put the phonetic pronunciation in there. And I know that I am bound to mess that up during the game. And there's no quicker way to lose credibility than to make a mistake on pronunciation, which you can control because you can ask either the coach or the sports information director on how to do that. So I'll have, the number of interceptions this year and how many passes they've broken up. And, this guy was a transfer from Virginia Tech. Just all those different things that you may not get in during the course of a broadcast. But I distinctly remember very early on in my college football career, I think it was my first season, and I was watching one of the early season kickoff games. Sean McDonough was doing it. It was Wisconsin versus somebody. And a Wisconsin offensive lineman got injured, and they had to fill like 5 minutes. And Sean had this whole backstory on the offensive lineman. And I'm just going, I'm overwhelmed about calling a game to begin with. And Sean is giving a story on a guy who, is not going to rack up any meaningful stats during the course of the game. So that was just really cool to me. So I try and have at least one thing on everybody who's likely going to step on the field. So I build that off of the 2 deep that the school gives us, and then I work from there. But I also look at the stats too, right? Because a school might list 2 running backs, but they might play 4. And for whatever reason, the coach or the SID doesn't want those other running backs listed on there. So you've got to cross-reference those things, Sunday or Monday when you start to build those charts. And for me, I build those, I usually get my assignment earlier in the week because the games that I'm doing for college football don't have to be slotted into a primetime window. So I get a little bit more advance notice. So I start building those as quickly as I can. If I don't, then it's on the plane ride home on Sunday, and then I start to fill in those stats. So that's football, basketball, and then baseball is a very cheap photocopy of the Bob Carpenter scorebook that I scotch tape into a manila folder, and that's what I do because unlike you, Jared, I'm not doing 162 games anymore, so I don't need a big scorebook. So I'm trying to be more space efficient in that way, and I keep all my player notes just in a Microsoft Word document.
Yeah, can I ask you a quick question? And this is rhetorical. I would like you to kind of address this. So I know for football, and Ted, I think you might do this too. So you got your spotting chart, and then you've got a separate, just normal legal paper, or like printable sheet with like storylines, right? Or different nuggets, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So what do you put on that, and how do you go about making sure that, because I know for me, one of the challenges, and like I work with a legend in Eric Nadel, and it stresses me out because he's got all these papers, like it's an office that he hasn't walked into for 7 years, but he knows where everything is at every moment. So what do you do with that separate sheet of paper to make sure you always know where it is, and how do you utilize it?
So I keep on the desk in front of me for both football and basketball, kind of like a storyline sheet. And at the top of that is the things that I want to hit on the opening drives. And I usually put that together late Friday or early Saturday, and I'll email it to the producer, the director, and my partner, Kirk Morrison, for football, so that we all know the kind of the things that we want to get into over the first couple of drives. Because after that, the game may be great, the game may be terrible, and you may get away from those things, but you want to at least set up the audience with some idea of why am I watching this game. And the other logistics of that include whatever conference I'm doing. This is something that I do Saturday morning. So I do the Mountain West a lot, and I'll do a half of a 8.5 by 11 sheet of what's going on around the Mountain West and all the other teams and who they're playing, and maybe 1 or 2 headlines from those games. If we get a scoreboard cut in from the studio, I want to know not only the Mountain West, but I also want to know what are the top 25 games. So I keep another sheet with the top 25 teams. Number 1, Alabama at Arkansas today, 12 Eastern kickoff. Alabama wins 45-7. And I go through the top 25 that way. And I've got everything going so that if we get a cut in from Chris Cotter in the studio, well, Chris is now doing games ACC Network, but that was the first name that came to mind. If we get a cut in from the studio and he finishes off with, and UCF routed Temple today, well, I can then go and say, oh, number 24 UCF. I know that that's their 17th win in a row against Temple, to try and add on to something. So it creates a continuity in our show. And those, my charts too, I print them out in landscape. They're 8.5 by 14. That's legal size paper. And then for basketball, it's also legal size, but in portrait.
Ted?
Yeah. So one more follow up for you, Mike. With those the charts for football, it seems like there is still plenty of room for the conversations that you get to have with the coach, coordinators, key players when you get in the day before. I mean, doing TV, obviously, compared to radio, where sometimes you just don't get that opportunity. In TV, of course, whether it be a shoot around for basketball or football, the conference call, or those meetings the day before at the facility or the team hotel, do you leave yourself some room so you can jot down, some of those nuggets that, they come last minute, like the day before the game or even the day of the game in basketball. But hey, this is important stuff. This is fresh. This is exclusive for us that we can share then to the viewer.
Yeah, I usually have some room either in the player box or on the margins where I'll write something in. And I still think the biggest challenge for me, I don't know if there's a better way for me to go about doing this. If there's a way you guys have, I'd love to hear it. So I'm learning here too. But there are sometimes where I find myself at halftime or in a commercial or after the game, and I look at my chart and something that I hand wrote in pregame, and I go, I didn't even look at this. Like, this is a great nugget, and I totally forgot to get it in. So I write those things in, but honestly, there's sometimes where I just forget them.
I've been right there with you, especially, and it still happens, but now, I mean, it's funny, we can probably joke doing play-by-play. We've got the color-coded set of pens and highlighters and all of that, and this means that. And, you might even have a color-coding system on your chart if you do it on your computer. Like, I'm sure, Mike, you have something like that, as we just saw, or, what you'll see from me, but just highlighting something before the game. Like this is high priority. I want to get this in. This is the freshest material. This is not something that the fan base knows about, some story that is told by the broadcaster that parachutes in for the game every single week. This is new. I need to hit on this. I know exactly where you're coming from with that. Okay, so I'm going to try to jump in by sharing my screen now. Let's see how this works. Stand by. So I'll start with basketball here.
Make sure you share the right screen. We don't want to know what's on the other screen for you.
Easy. Okay, so what do you see right now? Do you see what looks like notes?
Yep.
Iowa State. No.
Iowa State and Texas Tech. So let's start just with the notes, the supplementary material, if you want to call it. Like Mike, you were saying, you have storylines on the side, and so this is what I have just on the side. It's got the regular season series from last year. This game was in January, so the first time these two played this past season. One page on Iowa State, just a few things that aren't all chart because it includes interesting quotes from a coach or a player. They had a complete meltdown in the second half against Baylor, their previous game. And one of their players, Prentice Nixon, even said, hey, we played soft in the second half. It's like, that's pretty strong language. Hey, if it ever happens to come up, I've got that from just a few days ago. And when you get to the matchup against Texas Tech, inevitably, we're going to talk with Steve Prohm. And, I will jot down a few things from shoot around right there that goes in that section. And then to Texas Tech, very, very similar, a little bit more on them. Of course, national championship game the year before, losing to Virginia in a game that went to overtime. Chris Beard, nature of the team being so young, had 10 newcomers, of just a little bit of recruiting because that was very important for Texas Tech. They were reeling in top level talent in the class of not just 2019, but coming up in 2020 as well. At that time, again, this game in mid-January, and just something that I'm always looking for stuff that I hope is interesting and or entertaining to the viewer. And the idea is, if it is interesting to me, I hope it's interesting to them. You're using your news judgment skills, and you want to go what is beyond just in the game notes. You don't just want a bunch of stats. You want something that we can all sink our teeth into, both play-by-play and analyst, and of course the viewer at home. So I'd never done a game at Texas Tech. I'm based in Dallas, live in Dallas, grew up in Dallas, but have never been to Lubbock. And as Chris Beard has taken over the program, the thing that I keep seeing on their shirts, practice shirts, whatever, is 4-1. And I was just curious what that was. I couldn't even find it in the game notes. And so I find this article, I believe in the Lubbock paper, about what it was, and this hashtag that they use on social media as well. I don't know if this got in. I don't remember if it got into the broadcast, but I just had it just in case if it ever did come up. He picked it up from Bob Knight. Mental is to the physical as 4 is to 1, right? And it seemed interesting to me. And again, you hope that you find the right moment to fit that in. You're not trying to force it. That's the key with all this stuff. Yes, you're doing your homework, you're doing your reading, research, but you can't force it. If the moment calls for it, great. If it doesn't, hey, you probably see them again down the road. Can you see my board now, or do I have to reshare?
No, we got it.
Okay. So I like having both teams on one page. Now, it comes out as pretty small, and trust me, I've had people, partners say, I can't believe you can read that. It's no problem to me, and that's what counts. If Mike, I know you've got one team on one page, another team on another, and it's bigger print, and hey, you are comfortable with that. I like for basketball, obviously, I like having both teams on just one sheet of paper. And so I've got Iowa State here and Texas Tech. Just looking at one particular player, I give myself a little more room on the leading scorers or the top players, the all-conference caliber players. And for Texas Tech, that's certainly Jahmi'us Ramsey this past season, a freshman, in fact. And Davide Moretti played such a critical role on the team that went to the national title game the year before. And so I will give them an extra box or two for bio stuff, interesting information. I like to organize it numerically. And again, that's me compared to Mike. As you said, you like to organize it by, your top players, scorers, all the way down. I like it numerically. I find that fits. Some people like to put who they think will be the starters in the first 5 positions on the board, and then sixth man, other reserves that are going to come in, and then you have the walk-ons at the bottom just in case. For Texas Tech here, just walking through, I'm trying to go top down. What is the first thing I'm going to say about Ramsey in a biographical context? And one thing that jumps out at the time, the highest ranked recruit in Texas Tech basketball history. I like to leave room in that first box, again, because we're going to talk with Chris Beard and potentially Ramsey too at shoot around. And I want to prioritize what is in this first box that I've highlighted here that's next to him. Of course, I've got stats over here. In the blue, his season stats. I have in purple, if he leads the team in that category, a 5 in parentheses. He is 5th in the Big 12. And again, just like Mike said, I'm not referencing all of these stats. 16.3 points per game. If nothing else, it is context. You might reference that he's the 5th leading scorer in the Big 12, but I'm not giving you a number soup. The numbers in red, his numbers from the previous game against Kansas State when they won on the road. In here, I like to have a human interest story, if there is one, if it's interesting. So Ramsey wears a face mask, and of course it makes you think of Rip Hamilton and many of the others who continue to wear a mask even though it's not really necessary at that point. And I was curious. Ramsey's been wearing a mask all year, and you read up on him. He broke his nose the summer before his senior year in high school at Chris Paul's camp. You read more, and he never had the surgery, but he's comfortable with it. And so we're just talking with Robbie Hummel before the game, who was the analyst that I was working with. And Robbie says, I wore a mask when I played overseas in Russia. And I said, perfect. Now we can have a conversation about this. On top of that, the interesting thing about Ramsey was he does not wear the mask during practice. He only wears the mask during games. It's a comfort level for him during games. And so we put together, and of course, I suggested this to our producer. He ran with it. Credit to him and the people in the truck for this game. We came back from break, and we tell that story about Ramsey and the mask. We show a picture of him wearing a mask in the game, a picture of him from Texas Tech without a mask at practice. And just to have some fun, again, Texas Tech is the school that has a mascot known as the Masked Rider. And we showed the Masked Rider for the 2019-2020 school year and had some fun with it. And that leads us back into action, and it leads us eventually to Robbie. I set him up about his experience in Russia, playing professionally, playing with a mask after he suffered an injury. So I'm looking for those interesting tidbits. We all are. And it's just however you organize it, you got to be comfortable with it. And like Mike said, you got to be able to find it when the moment calls for it.
Ted, what program do you use to make this?
I use PowerPoint. It's very customizable, just like the program you use with Draw. In fact, I mean, they look pretty similar, but I've got all these boxes. And now this is the PDF version, so I won't drag and drop. This is the PDF version that I use to print it from. But again, just it gives you so many options, right? With the various colors, like back to Iowa State here, an injury I like to put in red. For something that happened the year before, I like to put in green, like right here. 2 years ago, I like a shade of maroon. I have no idea why. It's just something I fell into, and that's why I use it. But again, as long as you can synthesize that information, put it into context, and put it concisely for the viewer when the moment calls for it, go right ahead. That's what works for me.
All right, how do I'm going to throw some baseball on here. I don't know what do I do to share the screen?
So, Ted, you have to hit the
I have to X out? Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm getting there. Hang on.
Come on, Ted.
Hang on.
We have a new podcast name. We're changing already to 330 something stumble through technology.
Oh, this is awful. Awful. I don't know how to get to the main Zoom screen to unshare the screen. Is this embarrassing or what?
There should be a bar at the top with like a red bar at the top.
Here. I see it now. Thank you. It's tiny. Thank you. I can read my tiny print on charts that I printed out, but I can't see the stop share sign at the top of the screen. My bad.
All right, so a few things before I share my baseball thing. I think what we've seen is you guys have digitized and like done these through the computer. I do my football through the computer. I do my basketball. I take a template, but I handwrite it, and it's preference, and there's no I just want to make sure people know, it's okay if you want to handwrite these things. It's whatever works best for you. I handwrite basketball because I'm not as skilled using these apps that you guys are. And it just ends up taking me way more time to do it through the computer because then I can't, my design skills just are lacking. It's something I'd like to get better at, but I handwrite it. Ted's basketball chart and Mike's were totally different. They've both talked about it, but it's personal preference. And Ted's is packed with stuff on the basketball side, and he knows where everything is. I think the key is, as long as you know where your stuff is, that's all that matters. And you're not doing these charts for the gram. For instance, for me with baseball, I used to try and have everything so perfectly, neatly organized. I wanted it to be picturesque, and then it's I don't care. If I know, I don't need to put everyone's full name perfectly written. As long as I know what I'm looking at, that's all that matters. And I think you'll see that to a degree with this baseball stuff. And the other thing is, I want to make sure people know, you got to study these. This is a study guide, but you need to study it. Don't just do your spotting chart and then don't look at it again. Especially if you're struggling to remember where stuff is, or maybe you're not as familiar with a team or both teams. Look back over the notes you put in there so that, you got it up here, because I think we'd all agree our greatest asset other than our voice are these. And our job is to describe or talk about what's going on the field. And if we're doing this the whole time, we're not able to do that. And so don't rely, don't let the spotting chart be a crutch, right? It's there to help you. It's an aid. But if you're relying, or if your plan is, well, I don't need to really know anything because it's all going to be here. That masked rider story, Ted, the Jahmi'us Ramsey story. It's there as a reminder, but it's not like you've got a Jahmi'us Ramsey wears a mask, but he doesn't, you know what I mean? And so it's just important, I think, to remember those things.
And also, if you can, invest in a pair of these, the Bushnell extra wide binoculars for football spotting. That gives you a range of about 30 yards left to right. They are a godsend.
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to quickly go over baseball. I've decided a couple years ago to do it on an iPad. It's just I'm not having to lug around a thick book. I think the organization is huge. You can see right here, you've got different tabs that I can access during a broadcast. I can copy and paste certain things one day to the next. So when you're doing, 20 games in 20 days, it helps. I try to take advantage of the highlighting tools, the color tools. There's all sorts of functions that maybe we can talk about later. But right here, can you see my mouse, or is it just my screen?
We got it.
Okay. Yeah. So I try to have storylines or general notes right here, maybe something random. Some of these things, I know what it is, and no one else would. You can also see, like right here, I copy and pasted this from a website. So I'm not having to regurgitate everything, and it's all there in a way that website's able to organize it that I couldn't. I like knowing who's available in the bullpen or who's in the bullpen. And then right here you see, I think it's Tyler Duffy. Yesterday he pitched 2/3 of an inning and threw 10 pitches. So if I'm discussing what options are available, at least I know that he pitched yesterday. And a lot of that for me comes in place as an analyst, because in baseball you serve both functions. Here's my starting pitcher notes. I have statistics, I have biographical stuff. This you might recognize as just straight out of Baseball Reference. And then some of my own things. It might be a bullet point like, hey, he was an all-star. I have it highlighted to make sure to mention that. Some might be, more of something that could evolve into a story. Again, these are just general notes, MLB storylines. I think Carlos Carrasco, this had to do with his leukemia diagnosis. These are random notes on the Rangers. I always like to have some today in history in case the game's a blowout. And then here, I usually fill out the umpires, and I actually stopped doing the defense here, and I have it on a sheet of paper that's right in front of me. But you could use the defensive box here. These notes, I don't know how to zoom, but these notes are like nuggets, storylines tied to that player, things that I might want to talk about. And then here, I might have a statistical nugget, but it's more of a story. I try just to have the raw statistics here. I think right here I have 4-game hitting streak. I don't usually talk about a 4-game hitting streak, but, I put that in there. Willie Calhoun, 2 for his last 20. I have here in black what they did the night before. This is, I try to make sure to identify all the lefties. So you can see Chu, Mazzara, Odor, Asdrubal Cabrera is a switch hitter. The blue numbers are their season numbers. And then down here, I have on base, slugging, and OPS. Sometimes I'll put that in. Sometimes I won't. It just kind of depends. I also try not to – I think this is an example of a random game. Sometimes I won't put the same numbers for everyone because maybe a guy's not a base stealer, and it's just – I'll make note that he hasn't attempted a steal, but I won't put the same sort of emphasis on it. Team ranks are here. We have less than a minute, so I'm going to try something. I'm going to stop this one, and we're going to pick it back up so I can continue to go through this. So this might have a funky transition, but again, we're not great at technology, so stand by. All right, so we're picking this up. We're going to try edit it to make it a little nicer. But anyway, I'm going to go back to my baseball deal. I think it's here. You guys can see it again.
Yep.
Okay. So I apologize. I was trying to rush through it because I knew that our time was up. So I might just go back over. But again, this area right here to the right, random storylines. And I do that because I like to have it all in one area. I have my iPad and a laptop. And in my laptop, I'll have a database on a Google Doc of notes for every player that I've compiled in Major League Baseball. I'll have a separate one at times that I'll pull those guys. I won't remove them from it, but I will pull in guys who currently play for the Rangers. But I will be able to just Control F, and if there are notes that I don't include here, that I can always just go and find. And plus, Google helps too. So again, I think for me, and this is what I said earlier about don't do this for the gram and stuff. My spotting chart is going to look different, game to game. I might do something different each game. I'm constantly asking people, let me see your setup. And I take what I like and what I don't like I get rid of. And there are times, maybe 3 games in a row, I feel like there's a piece of information that I'm looking for and it's not on my chart. Well, I'm going to now start adding that. Or if I take a step back and audit, I'll decide, you know what, I'm wasting all this time putting some of this information in here and I never use it. Or I can make it way more easily accessible doing it a different way. For instance, I have these stats here, but I also have printed out on the counter and taped down a full stat sheet for each team that if I need something that's not included, I can easily reference. You see that the 8th and 9th innings weren't done. They probably got erased accidentally. I can drag and drop things. So this is 40 thing right here. This was probably in Rougned Odor's line score at some point. And when I got to it, I might have deleted it, on a different day, or I dragged it down. But I can, that's one reason why I like the iPad is I can have that right there. And it's a reminder, I want to get to this note. Or I can write something with my pen here. I want to get to this note. These right here, and I'm horrible at sometimes maintaining this, but these numbers here, pitch count. So I don't know what the numbers say, but what I'll do is I'll add on. So let's just say this is 3. So the first batter of the game saw 3 pitches. And then next, Willie Calhoun sees 3 pitches. I'll put 6 because I can easily subtract 3 from 6 to know it was a 3-pitch at bat. But it allows me to have a running total for the pitcher of how many pitches he's thrown in an inning. And then
is that how you got your certificate behind
that's
you?
why I have right here my advanced edition. Let me see. Okay, so my iPad has 4 pages. I've got
lineup. Whoa, that's a fancy iPad.
Well, I have the program. I use something called GoodNotes. Lineup, and then this has to do with the pitcher for the team that's facing this lineup. So in this case, Michael Pineda. I'll have various levels of statistics, and I'll take notes on them. Again, this is from Fangraphs right here at the top. This is from Baseball Savant, and then this is from a program called Sport Radar. And then here are standings as well. I'll throw something random in there. I'm not constantly looking at this, but I know what information I have. So if I need to quickly just scroll down from here to there, I can access that. It's tough maybe to show through the iPad, but it's very easy, or through this program, but it's very easy to access in the game. And then the next page is the next team's lineup, and you'll see I have a similar setup here for that pitcher. So that's going to be Jesse Chavez, and his is a little more complicated because he's played for so long for so many teams. But that's kind of my setup. I try to use the colors. I don't have one defined system like this color always means that, but I try and just switch it up. I think right here, if you see, I've got how how Pineda's done it versus lefties and righties. From this, I guess I can zoom in. So this right here, these, I'm not going to always have this. This right here, his slider usage, it's the 5th highest in Major League Baseball. Here he gets, a chase rate of 46% with 2 strikes, 7th best in Major League Baseball. I'm not always going to use those numbers to a T, but they're there for me. If he gets a guy to chase with 2 strikes, I don't need to necessarily say, oh, well, Michael Pineda's got a 46.4% chase rate with 2 strikes, 7th best in baseball. I can say, hey, Michael Pineda is among the best in Major League Baseball at getting guys to chase with 2 strikes. I don't always, especially on radio, need to be so specific because that gets lost. So anyway, again, I think if you were to look at my spotting chart game to game, there's going to be discernible differences. A lot of it depends on what the pregame setup is. Sometimes we get the lineups at 3 o'clock for a 7 o'clock game. Sometimes we don't get it till 5:30. That's rare, but it depends. And that's going to dictate what my chart is. But what I've tried to perfect, because I spend a lot of time each day on this, I'm not looking for shortcuts, but I'm trying to be as efficient as possible. And I don't want to waste 30 minutes jotting down things that I'm not going to use or that I don't need on the chart. And so that's why game to game, it's going to look different because I'm going to make decisions. You know what? This is not as important for me to jot down this game because we're not going to talk about it, or I have it committed to memory anyway. I'm not going to waste time doing things that I've committed to memory. That when I think of Joey Gallo, I always think of this story that's top of mind. I might make a little bullet point, but I'm not going to spend as much time detailing that. And so, yeah, I don't know. I know that I'm kind of going quickly here with a lot of different stuff, but that's kind of what I got here on the baseball side.
I have a bunch of questions. The first is, can you say for people who might want to get this, which includes me, what is the name of the program and who designed this score chart?
So the name of the program is Good Notes. I don't remember if it's free. If it's not, it's like, a $4.99 app or something. Whatever it was, if it was, it paid itself off in the first 5 minutes I used it if it's not free. The chart is from Aaron Goldsmith, voice of the Mariners, and does stuff on part of Fox Sports, football and basketball. And so
way better hair than you.
Way better hair than me. So if you notice the chart, and what you do is you upload the chart, you scan it, and then Good Notes does not come with this chart, but whatever chart you want to use, you scan it, save it as a PDF, and then you upload it. And so that's how it works. But you can see there's a difference. So this page, you've got the umpires here, and then this page you don't. And so it's two, they're for the most part the exact same, but slight differences with each one. Again, sometimes I'll totally use this. I don't know why I didn't have all the umpires. I might have erased them accidentally, but or maybe I just didn't put them in. But Good Notes, it's available in any app store, and then you upload whatever document you want, and you have that ready to go and ready to write on.
Now, Jared, I noticed this is a road game. Did you travel for this game, or were you doing this in the studio?
I traveled.
Okay, so this card looks different for a game where you're doing play-by-play versus one where you're in your regular role of host and in-game updates.
Correct. This is a play-by-play. This is a play-by-play one. I'm not. I do keep score when I'm not doing play-by-play, but my responsibilities before the game are such that it's just not realistic for me to be as detailed. And I would say that to do this entire score sheet, I'd say I spend, 3 hours per day. And some of that starts the night before when a game wraps up and we're in the post-game show. I'm going to do some advance work for the starting pitchers the next day. That night, we go back to the hotel or I go home. I'll do a little work. So it's not 3 hours straight. Some days might be more. Sunday day games or getaway day games, I'm probably not spending 3 hours. I just don't have that time from when they get us the lineups to when there's first pitch. Sometimes on a Sunday, we don't get the lineups until 2 hours before first pitch. So it's really not feasible for me to spend 3 hours. But yeah, I try and be as detailed as possible. But for me, I've got it might look like a clutter to others. I know where everything is on this score sheet. And I know we talked about that earlier, but that's important, I think, for anyone. You've got to know your own score sheet. You can have an organized mess in front of you, but as long as you have that understanding of the organization of it all, that's all that matters.
The last question I have, and I know, Ted, you have questions too, is, and this is not related to necessarily this specific chart, but for me doing minor league baseball, you have so many responsibilities as you do in your current role at the major league level too. And I've been out of full-time baseball since 2014, doing a lot more college than MLB. And like at the college level, anybody who's done a college game, you're just sweating bullets because you're probably not getting the lineup till like 45 minutes before first pitch, which is just awful. So for me, I always felt like getting my scorecard done was like a relative safety blanket, if you will, of like, okay, now that I've gotten this done, I feel better. Do you feel like there's a certain level that you need to have your scorecard done to where you feel comfortable, or like, can you sit down and just do a game no matter what?
Yeah, I think I can do it no matter what. I definitely, there's certain things I want, but I'll also add this on my laptop, not on this iPad. I'll have tabs open of certain internet pages or like things that maybe a story and I want to be able to tell, and it's got all the information. So I don't have everything here. I think Jerry Howarth, the voice of the Blue Jays for a long time now, retired, once told me that, some days you need a break from doing your full detailed scorebook. And it's not that you're half-assing it. you're just allowing yourself to be ready for the broadcast and mentally recharge. Because again, when you do 20 games in 20 days and you're dedicating 3 to 4 hours in the scorebook each day to go along with the hour and a half you spend in the clubhouse and on the field for batting practice and in the manager's office, I mean, you know, you need to be able to breathe. And so, especially for these day games, sometimes I'll just put the names, I'll put a relevant stat or two, maybe I'll put a bullet point or two. I've got the stats where I need them right in front of me, as I mentioned, taped out on a sheet of paper. So it's not like I'm stripping myself of the ability to have those. But, you know, those days I might just work more on the play-by-play mechanics. But, you know, the other thing, too, is you're around these guys every day, and a part of the whole don't lean on the scorecard. Some of these nuggets on the visiting team, I really need them on this side right here to remember. But a lot of this stuff I have in my head. And it's just, you know, the familiarity of being around, you know, the day-to-day of baseball. And also we play games, we play teams 3-4 days in a row. So, you know, for visiting player, let's see, Max Kepler, you know, this might be the first day of the series, the second day of the series, the third day of the series. I've got a lot of this stuff already in my head because I've been going over it. So it's nice to have, but I definitely don't feel like I'm in a panic if I'm only able to have half of this, you know, on my scorebook. But at the end of the day, as long as I've got the lineups, I do like to have the defensive part, and you can see here I did put it in so you can see what it looks like. Lineups, defense, and a stat pack somewhere that I can access, I'm good to go.
One thing for me, Jared, you said, so I can write. Again, it's an iPad, so I assume you're using a stylus or something?
Yeah, and I guess you can't see it here, but it's very easy to navigate between the pen portion, changing colors of the pen. You can see the highlighter. It takes some getting used to, so I was advised, and I would encourage anyone who's going to transition to this, start doing it if you can. And like, I have the benefit of spring training where I was able to get comfortable. Now I can do it in my sleep. At first it wasn't like that, but it is really easy to navigate once you get the hang of it. And again, yeah, you get familiar with the features. For me, I'm able to keep everything organized. I've got a folder that's got every single game, and I can always go back very easily like that. I don't have to flip through a spiral that the spiral portion's broken now, and it's tough to flip the pages. And it's, you know, I like to have a lot of space. So my scorebook was always massive, and it was a pain in the ass to carry around. Now it's really simple.
I've got, I know this is going to be a really long episode as a result, and this is probably, it's great because we're all able to share our screen and share some of our boards, which is fun. I love looking at your board, Jared, for baseball. Again, just something I'm not all that familiar with, having not worked in baseball, and certainly, Mike, with all of your experience with college football and basketball and the like. But one question from somebody who reached out to, I believe he reached out to all of us, concerned, I think, the episode that we are now doing, and that is how we balance stats, news, you know, what you read about a certain player or a team online, and interviews, your own interviews with coaches and players, and how we prioritize that, what kind of value we give to each of those elements. And the more I was thinking about, I mean, I think it's very different going from radio to TV. In TV, I think we touched on it earlier, but like the material that we get, Mike, when we have the access, just talking about college sports for a second, like we were saying with shoot around, or the conference call with a football coach, or an in-person meeting with a coach and players, only TV gets that. And at that level, you know, Jared, in your world in baseball, I mean, I can't imagine especially with you, how good you are in building relationships in the Rangers clubhouse, and talking with players during that availability. And, you know, yes, you're there with anybody else in the manager's office in his availability pregame, but batting practice, I mean, you glean so many nuggets. Like, for me on TV, that stuff is gold. If it's really good, I want to get to that first before I get to a certain profile or that was 3 weeks ago. Yeah, it might be good stuff, but it's out there. It's been out there, and I want to get what's new and fresh.
Yeah, I agree. And I'd say, my book probably looked like it had a ton of numbers, but I always say, like, with every number, there's a story. I don't like just going on and just spitting out numbers. Even if it's something like Joey Gallo's hitting 50 points better this year than last year, that's great, but tell me more. Why? And maybe he doesn't know, but that's the story. He doesn't know why. He feels like he's doing the exact same things, or you know what, he worked really hard in the off season, or changed this or changed that. So I think for me, just in general, stories versus numbers. Numbers are necessary at times, especially on radio. I try not to bog people down with numbers, but I never like to just look at a number and stop there. If it's an interesting number, I want to know the story behind that number. And sometimes you end up getting awesome stories that end up being totally unrelated to that number, but are great stories in and of themselves. But I agree with you, Ted. Yes, it's really easy to find the stuff that's online or on Wikipedia. And that stuff does have a place in a broadcast. There's no doubt about it, because sometimes it's you can't avoid them. But I definitely place a greater emphasis on the stuff that I've got that I know is not out there. I'll give you an example. I know I shared this speaking to UNT students with you in the spring. Nick Anderson's a reliever who played for the Marlins, now for the Tampa Bay Rays, who I actually called games for when he was with the Brainerd Lakes area Lunkers in the Northwoods League. And so I guess I had a little bit of a different relationship with him than the average person. And he shared a story about how he does carpentry work in the off season, and how he really thinks that, doing a lot of this and whatever with the shoulders actually helped improve his shoulder strength. And there's a big reason why he was able to break out in the way he did. And that's not out there in an article, SI, The Athletic. It's not out there. And so that is something I am going to do my best to not force in unnecessarily, but make sure I get in there, because that's not out there. That's not something his beat writers have. And so I'm able to do this more with the Rangers players, because those are where most of my relationships exist, but they are scattered around Major League Baseball with other people. But those are the things that you want to get. And that's why, and I'm all for the Zoom organization of the media availability this year with the health. I'm not complaining about that. But if it were to permanently go to that, it would stink, because, the time in the clubhouse where you can just take a look around and go speak to that guy, go speak to that guy, 89 to 93.7% of that is unrelated to anything you will ever bring up. It is relationship building. But the rest, the 11 to 6.3% or 6.3 to 11%, advanced edition.
And the math whiz.
Yeah. That's gold that you're going to use for a broadcast. And you just can't get that when you're on a shared Zoom with all the other beat writers, because they're not going to be as open to you in a group as they would be one-on-one based on your relationship.
So as far as stats go, I would like to refer to one of my favorite GIFs that is in my iPhone, which is this one, and it's the lady shouting. And I would like to say that no one cares about most stats. Or I could say, no one cares.
Make that a GIF.
The numbers can just be there's someone out there who can do that. So I should probably be careful who can turn me into a GIF. But when I've been doing baseball the last couple of years on ESPN radio, I've done a handful, 5 games over the last couple of years each summer. There's a lot of times where I don't give the holy trinity of stats of average home runs and runs batted in, because we know now that we know so much more about baseball. Batting average really doesn't mean that much. Home runs, not as impactful, as players have been paid to hit home runs, and their contracts have been worth way more than the home run is actually worth. RBI is a context-dependent stat. Was there anybody on base? You could be a great hitter, but if nobody's on base, then you can't drive anybody in. So, all those things don't mean what we thought they once meant. So if somebody, it was who was it on the Red Sox a couple of years ago who hit 40 home runs? I can't even think.
David Ortiz.
Martinez, yeah. Not a couple of years ago.
Carly Yastrzemski?
When Babe Ruth came up a couple years ago, but like if you've hit 40 home runs in June, like yeah, I'm gonna mention that because that's a wild number. But if you're hitting 280 with 2 home runs and 27 runs batted in, just like that goes up in one ear and out the other. Who cares? So numbers, and I say this all the time. If somebody sends me a tape too, don't just give me it's his 7th rebound of the game because that's what the stat monitor says in front of you. If you're going to give me a stat, TV or radio, it's either going to match with a graphic that's going to be coming up that you've worked with your producer and director and AP, or if it's on radio, give me context for that stat and why I should care. Don't just give me a stat to give me a stat. As for the storyline part of it, yes, there is absolutely an advantage to being on the network side of things because you get access to the football head coach and coordinators, to the basketball head coach and their shoot around, which sometimes are notoriously guarded. And I've never done a baseball game on TV. Baseball on radio, there was a team a couple years ago because we try and get a pregame interview. And this is the tricky part about baseball. I'm sure even for you, Jared, you might need to talk to a certain person, but there's a set time for when the clubhouse is open, but there's not the guarantee anybody's going to be there. And then they might say, as a certain player did to me a couple of years ago, right when the clubhouse opened, we got there and he's sitting in his chair at his locker. He goes, "No, I'm busy." And I'm like, what are you, you're not busy. You're just sitting here looking at your phone, you know? So there's a lot more that goes into it on that end.
I just want to quickly, that's where, and that happened with me with Josh Donaldson once years ago in 2014. He didn't know me from Adam. I asked him for a pregame interview. He said, "I'm busy." And 2 minutes later, he was giving someone else a pregame interview. And so that was like, oh my gosh. But that's where the relationships come into play. And like a national guy like Boog Shambi, he walks into any clubhouse and he knows 20 people in each clubhouse and no one's going to say no to him. Just my success rate of asking to getting the interview in the Rangers clubhouse is infinitely higher than it is in a visiting clubhouse. So I just wanted to reiterate the importance of the relationships for those purposes, but go ahead.
In 2010, the 1 year I spent in AAA when I was 20 years old, turning 21, I walked into the visiting clubhouse trying to interview somebody, and the players pointed me to some other guy, and I did an interview with a player who wasn't even the player who I thought he was, but he just pretended to be that guy for my interview, which lasted 90 seconds. It was a good lesson for me, but made me feel pretty pathetic. But as far as stories go, I agree with you, Ted. Is we have that access, and Jared in the Rangers clubhouse, you have access that almost nobody else has, especially because of your relationships. Why are we being sent to these games to meet with these people if we're not extracting new information? That's part of the job. We are on site, and for the foreseeable future, that may change, that we may not be on site, but we still have access. But that is incumbent upon us with that access to get new information. Or if there's a story that was written in the paper by a beat reporter, which, praise beat reporters everywhere because they give you the day-to-day coverage that you don't get from other sources. And so ask a follow-up question to that story. Get something new. Otherwise, why are you there?
That's the foundation, though. You're right. And especially at the network level, you're trying to get up to speed on that particular team. And you're reading the last, few weeks, game stories, profiles, features, whatever they be. And that is your foundation for your own prep. And it's the launching pad for you. But man, I go back to what's interesting, what's entertaining. Put it in context, especially stats. Don't drown in the numbers soup. You can do that very easily with game notes, either at the college or pro levels, and be curious. That's something that was I think instilled in all of us. And as an announcer, you're trying to put that picture in the frame, yes, for everyone, but what goes in that frame? What is interesting, and how? Beyond just the particular note that you might see in that PDF from the team, the game notes, okay, is there anything more to this? Anything more to this story that you can get a quote from a coach or a player or something like that? And now all of it comes to life. And now you can start chaining it together. Now you can set up your analyst with something about that. And that's when you have really served the viewer.
So I think for a future episode too, I think it would be good to talk about just working with athletes and coaches and developing those relationships, or knowing how to get the most out of them, just, as we're talking about that. So there's a lot here. We appreciate everyone. If you're still riding with us, thanks for sticking around for a little bit of a longer episode. Obviously, spotting charts are a huge part of a broadcast, and didn't want to shortchange them, as best as we would be able to give you as much. We're all three of us are available. If you've got follow-up questions, I know there's certain things on my spotting chart I didn't necessarily identify, and would be happy to go into. I think the same for Mike and Ted. We love interacting with with other broadcasters, at Ted Emmerich, at Mike Cousins, at Jared Sandler. Our Twitters are all our names, at our names. So easy to reach, easy to access. Guys, thanks so much, and looking forward to doing this. The three-man booth has come alive. We are now the three-man booth. Pal, what was the cartoon? It's like the Earth, the Wind.
Yeah, Captain Planet.
Captain Planet. And they all put their hands in, and it's like, yeah.
The Shield.
There
you go. Wrestling fan.
All right, fellas.
Well, you are.
Thanks so much again to everyone, and we'll be back in a couple weeks to talk more about the broadcasting and broadcasting world and the broadcaster life here on YouTube or wherever it is that you're consuming this.